You're listening to China Manufacturing Decoded from the Sophie's Group. Hi, welcome back to episode 315 of the podcast. Adrian hosting, and I've roped Paul Adams in to join me as guest today again. Hi, Paul.
Hello, Adrian. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm doing well. And we are coming to the listeners just after Chinese New Year. So Happy New Year to you, Paul, and Happy New Year to everybody listening.
Yes, likewise, everybody. It's Chinese New Year, that is. Excellent.
Correct, that's it. So sort of in mid-February this year, which is somewhat unusual. It's quite a late one, I think, but there you go. But anyway, the podcast does not stop for the Chinese New Year. Here we go. So today, Paul, we are tackling a common question in new product development, and you lead our new product development team. So who better, right? And that question is, what manufacturing processes should I use, and where is my production likely to get stuck? This is not a simple question to answer with sort of one sentence. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we can go through here, but we're going to try and limit it to around 20 minutes or so and just motor on through this. If we do choose the wrong process, I mean, this could really cause a lot of issues throughout the project for the long term, right?
Well, yeah. This is, like you said, the question you sort of posed there is really two parts. What is the process that I should be using? And, from a production point of view, where am I going to get stuck, or what are the bottlenecks, or what are the risks around sort of moving into production? Now, as you said, Adrian, we could talk for hours on this, but let's keep it to a sensible level and try and make it a little bit sort of cohesive and sort of interesting. So, yeah, definitely. So let's just break this down into two, as you said, sort of what process should be using. Well, the answer is, as always, depends. That's your standard answer to everything these days. But no, seriously, so on a serious note, assuming that you are looking for a contract manufacturer in China and you have sort of a product in idea and you want it to move forward, get produced, go through the development process and get that into manufacturing. And you've probably done a little bit of research, or maybe you've spoken to some people who have done this before. Maybe you have done it before yourself. But maybe you're a startup, and this is your first rodeo, as it were, and you're thinking, some of these processes I don't really understand, and I'm not really sure which is the best one I should go for. Well, ideally, work with your contract manufacturer because they have the experience. Okay, don't try and force a square peg into a round hole just because you read some article on it, or you think that this process should be the best process for my particular product because I saw something about it. Inevitably, your contract manufacturer should know and would know what best processes best suit your products. In other words, the components that are making up the actual individual components, and those components go into your product, as well as the volume requirements. Okay, so we've got a couple of sort of projects here at the moment. A very, very complex product, but the quantity is about 100 units per year. Okay, so that's a different ball game to something that is less complex, but we're making, say, 10,000 a week. Okay, totally different ballgame, and it would be a totally different set of processes potentially that are required for the product that's being made. Okay? So let's go through some of the obvious ones. Injection molding. So where is injection molding most suited, let's say? And this is obviously you're going to be your plastic sort of components. But again, let's break this down into when you should start to invest in injection molding, because we've covered this before, Adrian. Injection mold tools are not cheap. Okay, there's a big investment. It's a big investment. Okay, because there's a lot of material, a lot of steel, and these things the tooling is relatively big compared to the component that's being produced. Okay, so there's a big upfront cost. However, an injection mold tool is capable of producing hundreds of thousands of components to the same level of detail and tolerance, from day one through to multiple years down the road. Okay. So it's all about the volume. If you've got an injection mold part, okay, you know that you've got your investment upfront in the tooling, but your component price is also lower. Okay. This is another factor with respect to looking at the right process. On the flip side, okay, taking our product that we're looking at here at Gillian, for example, for one particular customer, highly
Mm.
complex product. It's got a lot of components in there, but we're producing about 100 a year. Okay, so do we really want to start, or does the customer really want to start looking at investing tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars in injection mold tools just for producing a couple of components a month? So 100 a year. Call it 150, 50 spare. The answer is no. It
No.
just doesn't make sense. So that's when you would look at CNC producing those components. Yes, you heard it right. CNC machining plastic components. Okay.
Mm.
So in CNC generally, in the world of engineering, you're talking about CNC equals machining metal components. Okay. Generally that's and this is what I'm saying. Don't necessarily try and force a square peg into a round hole, because it all depends, go back to that. So, yes, this particular customer, and it's the correct formula. Yes, we do CNC, the plastic components, simply because it just doesn't make sense to invest in tens of thousands of dollars for tooling in this particular product. Okay. However
Mm.
however, it depends on the complexity, and sometimes you can't CNC a machine because of the, sort of complexity of the part itself, where it does need lifters and sliders and various different inserts into the injection mold machine. Okay, so again, we need to be taught, or you need to be looking at and talking to your contract manufacturer with respect to taking their expertise and listening to what their advice would be from a processing point of view. All right.
Mm.
Now, other things, g- for example, may dictate what process you use simply because of what the product is. Okay. If you're using or if you're developing a product that's, call it a coffee machine, okay, for lack of a better term, okay, or lack of a better product, and this particular product, it has to deal with high temperature water. Okay, just under boiling. You don't want to boil the water when you're making coffee, because it's going to make it sort of sour and bitter. But it's close to boiling, so you need to make sure that the materials you're using can withstand high temperature. Now, do you want to injection mold some components? Yes, you can, for sure, no problems. But you need to make sure that you're choosing the right material. That material needs to have a specification that is safe for consumers. Okay. So if you're leaching polymers into the water, which is not safe for human consumption, you got the wrong material, potentially the wrong process. So it's a very complex aspect to with respect to trying to understand what the product is, what process I use, and I just moved on to like what material we're using, which I'm not going to talk about in detail today.
Yeah.
So all of that needs to come into consideration, and this is where you need to make sure that you're working with a reliable contract manufacturer that has experience in producing the product that you are trying to develop. Okay?
Mm.
So, and that's really key. Let me have a look at some of the other sort of processes that could be used along the way in various different products. Take a smartwatch. Okay, there's another nice little product for you. Now,
Mm.
what's the body of the smartwatch made from? Well, you could say it's made
Probably
out of
metal.
yeah, it could be steel or aluminum or
Yeah.
titanium if you're, if you're in that way inclined. But it also could be a plastic one. Yeah, so
Sure.
it depends. Yeah, if it's cheap and cheerful, sort of more, on the lower end, call it like sort of kids learner watch, or sort of a toy that whatever the kids are doing. Yeah, it's going to be
Uh-huh.
plastic. You know, but you took your high your high expense branded sort of products, no, for sure, they're not going to be plastic. They're going to be metal. How do you make it? How do you make it? Well, you know, you could go CNC clearly,
mm,
because we just talked about CNC equals metal machining, but you could also go die casting, high pressure die
mm,
casting, which is similar process to injection molding. In other words, is you got the upfront cost of your tooling, okay, which can produce exactly the same component, same shape, not quite as good on the tolerance as injection molding, but close enough, for the base sort of unit. But this process can knock out thousands and thousands and thousands, exactly the same shape, day in, day out. Okay.
mm,
Is it gonna be CNC machined afterwards? Yes, probably it will do, okay, for the, sort of the final shape. So, again, it it comes back to it all depends what the product is,
mm,
all depends on the surface finish, all depends on the tolerances required in the product. It all depends on a number of different attributes, to the actual product itself. The
mhm,
environment it's gonna be used in. Is it gonna be abused? Well, say abused. My kids tend to abuse their products because, kids do, whereas I tend to look after my stuff a little bit longer because, I've got to see the benefit.
yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, you're paying for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I'm paying for theirs as well, and they don't realize,
Yeah,
the value of it.
that's
But
it.
you see what I'm saying, Adrian?
Yes.
So that there is no, and you're right. I think you sort of alluded to this to start with. There is no simple answer. There is no one answer, that
Mm,
meets all the criteria. It very much sort of depends on what you're doing.
mhm,
CNC is a fantastic sort of process, it's particularly with these sort of modern 6-axis machines these days, high speed sort of machining, excellent accuracy, and again, very, very good at churning out hundreds or thousands of the same product, but it's not as cheap as your die casting. Is it
mm,
more accurate? Yes, it's more accurate, but it's gonna be more expensive, I tell you that. So, and again, you need to look at the break-even point with respect to the CNC component is gonna be higher than the die casting, but the die casting's got an upfront investment for the tooling. So,
mm,
you look at the volume, and it all comes down to this again, looking at the volume of the units that you're gonna be producing per year, and you're saying, "You know what? I'm just gonna stick with CNC because I'm gonna be, sort of producing a few thousand, 10, call it, I don't know how many thousand it is, versus, you know, the cost of the tooling plus the individual parts from
mm,
the, sort of die casting."
yeah,
So there's a lot to go into it, with respect to what process am I gonna using, the cost, the volume, the accuracy, the finish, everything like this. And this really comes and I come back to it again, you need to make sure that you're dealing with a reputable contract manufacturer that knows what they're doing. And I'll touch on to something we've spoken about before, which is DFM. So Adrian, now design for manufacturer. Okay, and this is where it all pans out. Okay, design a product for manufacturing, design a product for mass production, design a
mm,
product for cost, design a product for, a number of different attributes along the way. If your contract manufacturer can do that with you, and you're working very closely with them, the process will automatically present itself, okay, as the
mm,
best option. Mhm. And everything goes hand in hand. There, getting a product from your idea into mass production is not a simple process, as we know.
mm,
It's a highly complex process which requires a lot of discipline and needs a process, the MPI process or new product introduction process, right? And you need a number of skillful people along the way in order to help you get to mass production. Okay.
right. And what I like here is that although, like, a certain listener might be thinking, "Well, okay, but Paul hasn't told me what process I need." And yeah, that's true, but what you're kind of outlining here is the kind of conversation that you're going to hopefully have with your contract manufacturer or your manufacturing, generally speaking, right? The sorts of questions that they're going to be asking and the sorts of feedback that they're going to be giving regarding, well, okay, based on the product that you're describing to us and your requirements in terms of the numbers, then we're going to be advising you go in this direction rather than that direction, and this is the reason why, right? And so there are more production processes that we could go into right now, but actually to give an insight into how that conversation goes, I think that that's really good already. And actually, we did a podcast episode on production processes, outlining quite a few of them and what they're all about fairly recently, didn't we, Paul? I think so.
We did,
Uh,
yeah, yes, yes, I remember that.
yeah, so I'll link to that in the show notes, and you can go back and listen. Right at the start of the episode, I said that the sort of big question is, what manufacturing processes should I use, and where is my production likely to get stuck? So we've covered how to start to get a grip on which manufacturing process or processes you're going to need. So let's move on to the second part of that, if we may, Paul, and that is where production is likely to get stuck. So kind of like, where are bottlenecks likely?
Yeah, so I think that's a good segue into the second section, Adrian. Now, we talked about volume, and this is where I want to start. Okay, we're talking about the volume, the product unit. Okay, so if you've got a product that you know you've got sort of high demand, in other words, 10,000 units a month, for example, you very, very confident that you can sell that and potentially more, you need to make sure that you're working with a contract manufacturer that can actually produce this. Now, does it stop there? No, of course it doesn't, because most or a lot of contract manufacturers will have some vertical integration, but potentially not everything. Okay, so therefore there are subcontractors. Okay, so these subcontractors also need to meet the requirements of the initial question. Can you produce my units in time, at the right quality, at the right price, etc., etc.? Okay, so it's not just about asking the surface level question. You need to make sure you are doing due diligence on any subcontracting that is being carried out with your subcontractor, with your sort of contract manufacturer. And a good example on this one would be PCBs. Okay, so you take a contract manufacturer that has in-house capability of CNC machining. You've got internal capability of injection mold tools and injection mold machines. In other words, pumping out your plastic parts. That's no problems. You've got R&D. You've got design. You've got the manufacturing assembly lines, but no PCB. Okay,
Mm.
so you don't ask the question with respect to you guys. Can you make sure you can guarantee a minimum 10,000 units a month, because this is my current volume and I'm hoping to grow. Can you make sure that you can do that? Yeah, okay, that's a smart question to start with. But then you need to make sure you are digging in with respect to, do you cover every single aspect in-house? If not, who are your subcontractors and can they meet the same requirements? Okay. And this is really, really important that you understand that I would say the majority of contract manufacturers do not have everything in-house. Okay. So this is a question that you really must ask, because those subcontracting partners or strategic partners play just as much an important role in your main subcontractor. Okay,
Mm.
or, sorry, contract manufacturer in delivering all of your products. Okay, so that's the first thing. Making sure that all of the subcontractors meet your requirements from every aspect: quantity, quality, pricing, etc., etc. Okay, so that's the first thing. But then, yeah, okay, let's focus now on your main contract manufacturer. When they talk about, yeah, no problems, we can do the 10,000 units a month for you, but that's just you. What is the total capacity of the factory? How many other sort of customers are they promising 10,000 units a month? There's no problems, because at some point they may meet maximum capacity. where the next customer that says the 10,000 a month sort of requirement may break the camel's back. Okay, that may be the straw. So you need to make sure that you're working with a contract manufacturer that has capacity. In other words, you want to be talking to someone that's got 60% capacity at the moment, but they've got room to grow. Okay, so if they're at 60% this year and they've got growth plans, well, guess what? 3 years down the road, they're going to be at maximum capacity if they're not growing. Okay, because they're just taking on more work, just to sort of make a quick buck, whatever the case may be. So that's really, really important that you work with the correct contract manufacturer and make sure they have spare capacity. Okay, because you need to grow,
Mm,
they need to grow. Okay, we don't want to be backing yourself into a corner. Okay,
mm. Yeah.
sorry, go on, Adrian.
No, no, no. I'm just saying, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And another one is I want to touch on skilled labor. Okay, in China, okay, it's sort of very common for particularly sort of around, we'll just add Chinese New Year, okay, and migrant working is a big thing over here. Okay, in other words, staff will come from wherever their hometown is. Yeah, and I talk to people here and work in a Gillian. They say, "Oh, did you have a nice time? Where did you go?" I went back to my home province. How far away is that? It's like 1,500 kilometers away. It took me 2 days to get home. Well, they come back, okay, because 'cause they've got a good job and they're happy here, but some don't, okay? Some migrant workers don't come back, okay? And if you
Mm,
built your and particularly on the shop floor, okay, and this is particularly the case for a lot of staff that in the assembly line. Now, if you've spent the past year training people up to build a particular product that takes some skill, okay? What's the guarantee that they're gonna come back? Okay. What if they don't come back? Then you've got to go through that learning curve again. So it's an important factor, an important question to ask your contract manufacturer. Do you have a set of permanent workers on the shop floor or doing the assembly that are what we call in key positions? Okay, those key positions are generally operations that require a little bit more skill than just putting one widget into another widget. Okay, so this may be something that is particular for your particular project. Okay, so it's really important to understand, do you have key staff in key positions that are retained year after year? Okay, because if you're relying on training new staff every year or every how many months, whatever, if there's a high turnover, that's not a good thing, then the quality is going to be affected. Okay, and this is the last thing you want to be doing is variable quality issues because the staff is a high turnover or the skill level is not at the required level, okay, in order to put your product together.
mm, mm. Absolutely.
So that yeah, there's loads of things I could talk about, but I can't talk about too much here because of intellectual property rights, okay? And we need to make sure we're protecting our customers' products. But yeah, and I've seen that. I've seen that, and the discussions that we have on a relatively regular basis, with respect to key positions in the production line on certain products that are going through, which is really key. Uh,
Okay.
Another aspect is now this is the big one. Okay, this is a big one. This is about component supply. All right, component supply is, and we literally we just saw this last week. As a particular customer come through the door and said, "Oh, I've got a new product. Here it is. Here's the bill of materials. Got it all worked out. Let's go." Well, when we done some research from purchasing team, the IC that they had chosen is not very popular. In other words, it's very, very difficult to get hold of. All right. And it's on the shortage list. And this is a brand new product that they've actually specified. They've specified a product or a chip that is very difficult to get hold of. If it's difficult to get hold of, for example, the lead time, when I checked, the lead time, get this, Adrian, was 52 weeks. Can you imagine that? 1 year
What?
lead time, you know? And this is on brand new
Okay.
product. So, you know, it's making sure that you've got your components correct for the build, and not just stick with, "Oh, I used to know, I've used that chip in the past, or I've used that widget in the past. Now, fantastic." Okay, yeah, it might be, end of line, or it might be, that rare unicorn thing, you know? Gotta be very
Mhm.
careful with this, and this was exactly the issue we had last week with a particular customer. We pointed out
Right.
the issue, and they, "Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, let's look at an alternative." Luckily, there was an alternative chip that could be, slotted straight in, no problems, okay? Not on any shortage, readily available and a cheaper price. Cheaper price
Mhm.
because it's being readily made, made in mass production,
Absolutely.
as opposed to, "Oh, we need to make another 10,000. Let's set up again."
Mm.
Key, absolutely key, making sure that your components are readily available and they're not custom made where possible. You don't want to be going down custom made sort of components and just for your, I'm talking about, specifics. Obviously, your casing is and everything like this is going to be custom made because that's, the old, the overall idea of the products. But I'm talking
Mhm.
about chips or, specific components inside. Make sure they're
Mm.
off the shelf and readily available.
Mhm.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
you are going to get yourself into an issue where you've got a bit of a bottleneck or a sort of a problem with supply chain,
Absolutely.
for
Yeah.
sure.
That makes a lot of
Um,
sense.
Another one I want to talk about, Adrian, is assembly lines.
Mm.
Now, when we show customers around our place, yeah, we've got two types of assembly line. Basically, we've got the U-shape assembly line, and we've got the straight assembly line. Okay. Now, we've done that for a particular reason. The U-shaped ones are pretty good for high turnover contract manufacturing sort of companies where we're building one product one day, we've got a different product the next day, easy to strip down, easy
Mhm.
to manage, and basically the products go in a horseshoe. Okay, during the build, larger
Mm.
products with more assembly parts, they'll go on the straight line, but, have you ever, been down the production line where in between one station and the next, there's just a pile of products, or work in progress? Right? This is a problem. Okay, regardless of what shape your line is, regardless of how automated it is, you know, if you've got a one particular station on the production line that is slower than everything else, that's that's the speed of the line, okay?
Mm.
Now, the speed of the product going from the start to the finish, okay, is called, well, generally, we call that your takt time, okay? So that is your basic your takt time, your slowest part, okay? Because that's gonna slow everything down. Now, what we want to be looking at is what we call balancing an assembly line, okay? Or is your line balanced? Mhm. So if you've got, it's very, very easy to do this. Just walk around, okay? If you see nothing in between workstations, then it's pretty well balanced.
Mm.
If you're walking through 3 or 4 people that's got no problems, nothing in between, then the next person's got like 5 or 6 piled up before them, then that's a bottleneck. Okay, because he can't, or that particular station can't produce it at the same speed or throughput as the previous stations. Okay, and he's
Mhm.
slowing the whole thing down. Or not him, but the actual process itself is slowing the whole line down. So what do you do? Well, there's a couple of things we can do there. Is put put parallel, sort of stations in. Okay, so, maybe we've got one at the front, one at the back of the line. We've got 2 people doing the same thing. In other words, we're cutting the time down by half by doubling up on people. Okay,
Mm.
that may be it. Okay, or, I just talked about earlier, automation. Maybe we put in some automation. If it's a gluing process that takes time, put in a machine that does the gluing. Okay.
Yeah.
So, put in a machine that does 5 or 6 or 10 at a time, you know? So, all of these things need to be looked at with respect to how to optimize your product going through mass production. In other words, reducing the bottlenecks wherever you can. Okay?
Mm.
So that's all about line balancing. So, which is, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I like looking at that, and I do that on a regular basis when I'm walking around the shop floor with respect to seeing how products are moving through the production lines.
Yeah, fascinating. And again, maybe this isn't something that you would immediately think about when you're a business that's bringing a new product to market and you're working with a manufacturer. Does this even cross your mind? Should it? Well, yeah, but this gives you, the good reason of why you should bear things like this in mind. And I guess you would agree. Go and walk the floor. Get on a flight, get yourself over to China or India or Malaysia or wherever, and get in there and actually go and see how things are running for your product. I think you'd agree that's a good idea.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Ooh,
And
great.
yeah, and everybody ultimately talks about how do I reduce cost? Well, this is a pretty simple one to look at. If your
Mm,
product's being stuck, or there's a bottleneck on the production line, that means it's taking longer to produce, than what we should do.
mm,
Do the math. So,
good. Okay. I like it. So that has addressed what manufacturing processes should I use and where is my production likely to get stuck, and bottlenecks, if you prefer. Obviously, we could go into further detail about this, but we're going to call it a day right now. It's a little amuse-bouche, if you like. And if you've
yeah,
got further questions, on these topics, get in touch. Paul and his team will be happy to have a chat and see how we can help you. So, we've spoken about having that discussion with your contract manufacturer to look at which processes are suitable and why, and what your options are. The importance of DFM. I mean, that's always a given. Every time you're on, I think you always talk about the importance of design for manufacturing,
yep.
and for good reason, right? So, yeah, I get that, and some of the common bottlenecks that you should look out for as well, and obviously squash those ASAP if possible. So thanks for joining us again, Paul.
All right, Adrian, no problems. And like I said, Adrian said, if you want any advice, just reach out. I'm more than happy to walk you through it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And to the listeners, I'll link to the various resources that we've mentioned in the show notes, and we'll be back next time. Thanks again for listening to this podcast brought to you by the Sophie's Group. We're on a mission to provide you with everything you need to manufacture effectively in Asia, including inspections, auditing, new product development support, contract manufacturing, 3PL warehousing and fulfillment, and much, much more across Asia's key manufacturing areas. Visit us at sofeast.com, that's SOFEAST.com, to learn more and get help. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, please do rate, review and share, because it will really help others discover us too.